All right, I think we're going to make a start. Anyone that joins late, we can just recap shortly. So good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming to tonight's webinar on De Vere Partners' plans for 8 to 10 Greenock Road, which we call Soapworks. Thanks again for coming. My name is Theo Julius. I work for LCA, and we're helping De Vere with the community engagement piece for this project. I'll be your chair for this evening, and I'm supported by my colleague Sam Griffiths behind the scenes on the tech. We've got Kieran De Vere from De Vere Partners. We've got Ria Shepherd from HTA Design and Paul Manning from New Steer Planners. Tonight's webinar is part of a wider public consultation that we've been running over the last few weeks. We had two public exhibitions, one on Thursday, one on Saturday, at the local South Acton Community Centre. And we're really pleased to see quite a lot of the community come down, view the proposals and give their feedback. I think a few of you tonight came along as well, so thanks for coming back. I'm just going to do a very short housekeeping section, and then I'll hand over to Kieran and Ria to run through a very short presentation on the proposals. Throughout the presentation, if you've got any questions, put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. I'll then read these out to the panel after the presentation to run through. We're going to aim to finish by 7, or when we run out of questions, whichever comes first. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kieran and Ria to take us through the presentation.
Hi, I'm Kieran De Vere. I'm the owner, I suppose, of the site coming forward. We've brought forward a number of these sites in the borough of Ealing and on this industrial estate. And we're trying to deliver, I suppose, homes for the community, whether that be affordable housing and, commercial jobs and what have you. But yeah, we've got this project. We've got a few others coming as well. But yeah, we hope you like the presentation.
Great, thanks, Kieran. So we've shared these visuals and through the development and a series of slides at the public exhibition on Thursday and Saturday, as Theo confirmed. But I suppose our kind of opening line is we are looking to celebrate the rich industrial heritage of the site, creating a new mixed sustainable community where people can afford to live and work under one roof. And that's been our, I suppose, ethos through the design iteration and development of this scheme, and we hope to continue that through the designs. So we're looking to provide 110 homes, of which 35% will be affordable. We're looking to provide a modern and flexible workspaces at the ground floor. So this is about maintaining that industrial for kind of small startup units and larger businesses which are going there. And that may be the existing people. So the existing users of the industrial space may stay, or for new people to come to this area. We're hoping to introduce kind of greenness to the scheme. So we have podiums, so roof terraces, podium, thinking about the sustainability aspects of the building, the biodiversity, and all that combined with a car-free development. The building itself will bring more jobs to the area, which is obviously important through the construction phase and both when the facility is then open in terms of that industrial use at ground floor and the wider use classes that could be used within the building. We've done quite a bit of research into the site's history and hope that our kind of design iterations and the thoughts and processes behind that are kind of referencing that historic aspect. And we hope that through our design, we're essentially going to be providing really high quality, inclusive residential design, which is transforming the street scheme, providing new public realm and access to the wider kind of developments, creating this sustainability that sits not only within our site, but in the kind of wider borough and buildings surrounding us. So I'm sure you're aware of where the site is, but we have a bit of site analysis that we've kind of worked through just to kind of get an understanding of the area where we are and the kind of developing context coming forward. So obviously in the borough of Ealing, we're located just off kind of the North Circular and the M4. We have access through to the A406 as well. And you can see we're just on the perimeter edge of the borough itself, so sitting in the southwest corner. Zooming into the map, the site sits, as Kieran noted, 8 to 10 Greenock Road, which is this red area here. So we're really close to the South Acton station, and Acton Town Station is a short walk up the road. There's Acton Gardens, that's South Acton Gardens, which was where we held the public consultation within the community centre there. And I believe that that kind of wider master plan has now been developed out kind of extensively. That was actually designed by HTA, and we developed some of the early buildings that were located on this top corner here. Within the wider area, we have this light industrial estate, which has been kind of coming forward over a period of time, and we'll share the kind of new generation and designs that have been put forward for that, including the TfL site and the Stirling Bollow sites also. Further afield, we have Gunnersbury Park, Chiswick Business Centre, Chiswick Centre, which is kind of the high road, and then also another kind of Acton Centre, which is to the north of the site towards Acton Central Station. So a well-connected site within the wider borough. Just looking at some of that plan context I referred to, obviously the number 1 denotes the South Acton master plan that was originally put forward and is being currently built out. But in addition to that, there's the TfL site that runs all the way along the edge of the track. So this has got outline planning with detailed approval for a building on the corner here at 25 stories. There's then a master plan that's been proposed for this central piece in here, which we refer to as kind of the Bollow Lane and Stirling Road master plan, which was developed by Hawkins Brown. Various plots along this have actually got consent, so number 4 and number 5 have got consent and are being built out. So they are currently under construction, and they again propose the industrial use at ground floor with residential above. Number 8 and number 7 were linked together and have consent as well. And number 9 has consent also, which is 3 to 15, which Kieran put in for planning and was one of the earlier images shown. Part of that master plan you can see here was developed by the Hawkins Brown team and essentially shows how the buildings can be brought forward on a plot by plot basis. So this is a future development of this area, and the beginnings of that have been going under construction. You can see we are a short distance away from that in the Greenock Road site area. Just some visuals here of the surrounding context. We've got the South Acton regeneration, some sketches of the Bollow Lane TfL development, the land at Stanley Road, which was originally submitted for planning, which is to the north of the site. 2 to 10 and 29 to 39, these are the 2 that are under construction at the moment. There's 17 Stirling Road, which is a permitted development scheme, which we believe is also being developed with the council to come forward on the Stirling Road sites. And then 67 to 81, 1 Stirling Road and 1 to 9, which is on the corner, so stepping up to the 19 stories, and 3 to 15, which has also got consent. So all of these schemes have consent in the surrounding area. Moving on to the site analysis of the scheme, we've interrogated the existing site to look at what's there. So you'll see the parameters there, the building plot line. So we've got number 8, which is durable house, a small little office building, and then number 10, which is the laundry building that sits next to the allotments. And essentially, we're just showing the kind of diagrams of how far that kind of walking distance is between kind of the 400 metres to that new plot that will be coming forward here. Obviously, the TfL site sitting on the corner here, but the reason for rationale for obviously bringing these images forward is just to show kind of the existing context, and then obviously as we go through some of our site analysis to talk through where local amenities are. So the site from Bollow Lane, just looking down, we've just shown some imagery here. I'm sure you're very familiar with the surrounding context, but if you have any questions, we can come back to that later. The future heights of this area and this development coming forward, as noted, we've got the 25-storey consented TfL site on the corner. That steps down in height through kind of 18, 15, 16 stories located next to that, and it undulates down in height towards Acton Station, so it gets lower at the other end. And this is the same with the Bollow and Stirling Road site as well. So there's taller bookends on the corner. This building here is at 19 stories, but in the middle, the buildings undulate between kind of 15, 14 stories, stepping down at points to kind of 9, 10-story shoulders. And then the buildings get taller at the opposite end of the streetscape where we're at 15 stories. There's also the consented 93 Bollow Lane that sits in here, which tiers down. This is a height of 12 stories sitting in here, given its proximity to obviously the houses being quite closer, much closer there. So that is a slightly smaller building. And then the Stanley Road scheme that I referred to, which is also in for planning, is at the 17 stories on the corner and stepping down to a 10-story shoulder. And we've also denoted kind of the end of the Stanley Road scheme, which is at 9 stories sitting on that corner. Just the wider borough, some of the parks and locale for the future kind of residents and uses. So we obviously denote the allotments on here, and then obviously the green spaces that will be coming forward with the TfL. But in the wider master plan, there's also Gunsbury Park, we've got South Acton Park, there's many pocket parks within the South Acton development, but we would hope that within our scheme we provide the amenity space for residents on site, with obviously the opportunity to walk to various larger parks and open spaces within the borough. The existing industrial on the site, we've just denoted what these uses are. I mean, I referred to earlier, we're a commercial kind of laundry facility, which is shown in the red, which sits at number 10. And Durable House is a software connections company. So it's very much kind of more office space, whilst a lot of the other uses are kind of varying from studios to window facilities to timber yards. I believe there's now a dark kitchen located. So it's kind of various opportunities within the area. There's also a cafe facility on the corner here as well. Some images of just those spaces and what's kind of provided within these industrial uses. So we're seeing that kind of these larger spaces are required. So kind of the 4.5 floor to floor heights are needed to be able to either showcase large bits of equipment or to be able to store various materials and products. In terms of our proposal, we've looked to optimise obviously the industrial ground floor, and this is based on the GLA's guidance to maintain strategic land which is industrial, so high quality land that they believe we should be maintaining. That's our approach, and what we'll do with that is keep the same amount of industrial space that the current buildings propose. So our strategy is to come off Greenock Road and to have kind of the residential entrances coming through and into a central core at the back, with residential refuse off to one side and the potential for kind of a loading bay for refuse transfer in that location there. The rest of the ground floor is, broadly speaking, that light industrial space being used and optimised by having small vehicular access down and into the front of the building. Some of our previous feedback on other schemes has been that industrial users need to be able to get small vans and vehicles into their units to be able to provide enough deliveries and drop-offs and the like. So we're providing all of that on site within our scheme itself. Stepping up to the first floor, this would be a full floor of that industrial space, and we're looking at a 4.5 metre floor to floor, and this allows for kind of the flexibility and adaptability of the scheme as well in the future, should light industrial kind of not be appropriate. A lot of our feedback from the community kind of engagement process has been that maybe a cafe facility or kind of smaller uses would be really beneficial for existing residents as well as our own residents on the site. So we have looked to see if there are particular areas where there could be kind of that bringing in a cafe facility which is located next to the residential area, whilst maintaining kind of that industrial space to the rear of the site, where it could be kind of sewing workers' factories, it could be storage, kind of timber production, or be broken down into a series of different spaces with the kind of office facility on that first floor. And we've looked at how those visuals might look. So thinking about those kind of vans being able to reverse into the building, which is kept away from kind of the residential entrances, and then having that office space above on the first floor. And just another couple of visuals of what that might look like. The residential space is located from second floor and up. So on this floor, we're providing broadly most of our amenity space. So we've got a communal podium that will sit on this level, and then units that wrap around this, ideally proposing those so they become dual aspects, so they get really good high quality accommodation with cross ventilation, good daylight sunlight, and are providing nice high quality homes to residents with private balconies. As we step up the building, we get to the 10th floor, and we have another terrace that's proposed on that level, whilst at the 13th floor we're looking to introduce a terrace there, and then the top of the building will then have the plant. In the basement, we have our residential cycle facilities, so moving that away to be in a safe, secure location, so not at ground level. So residents will come in through a separate lift access and be able to go down into this space to use this area. You'll note also a few kind of items on the building. We've got 2 staircases. This is from a fire perspective for tall buildings. So there's 2 forms of escape. So one that can be used by firefighters and one that can be used by residents, as well as having evacuation lifts and firefighting lifts separately. In terms of overall quantum, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at 110 homes with 35% affordable, with a high quantum of those units being family housing. So really considering how we can provide a good mix of homes for kind of varying people. So that's from the kind of affordable studio units, which are much smaller, to then being able to provide the family accommodation. Some further visuals of the entrance just show how we've looked to kind of have two different architectural styles, so the residential feeling much more light and brickwork, whilst the industrial was picking up on kind of a more GRC metal approach, which feels much more in line and solid with kind of the site's history. So our rationale was that the soap works was very much about the movement of the cladding and about having kind of draped facilities, whilst the motorworks island, which came in kind of the early 1900s, was then about having various cars and factories that were then produced within the local area. Just an overall, I suppose, visual sketch of what the site's currently looking like. You can see Acton Town is so South Acton master plan, which is sketched on there with the various pocket parks that run through that. We've then got the Bollow Stirling Lane master plan, which sits in here, and the TfL master plan, which is shown at the bottom running down here. Our site itself just sits in this corner, and we've shaded on the Stanley Road. We're aware of that the council are looking to do a master plan for this whole area, so there will be a future regeneration for this whole site as well coming forward, seeing all of these kind of developments being brought forward. Part of that and part of our analysis has been looking at the site and how it sits within the surrounding context. You can see here our kind of building is, even at 16 stories, significantly smaller than obviously the TfL schemes, the 1 to 9 Colville Road, and obviously the wider borough. So the views we have taken and the analysis we have done, we have made sure our building is setting down within this overall site sections, and part of our application is to look at the wider townscape views, so from various streets, which will be agreed with the council. But the context of the surrounding and developing future is much taller obviously than the current existing context. And part of that study and analysis to understand the heights of the building is to also review our massing and overshadowing of the allotment area and any kind of space and houses surrounding us. Given that we are to the southwest of the allotments, we kind of don't really impact as we go through various kind of forms of the day. Our building is set kind of to the southern edge of the site, so we're on our southwest corner. This area in here is 2 stories, so very low, so we only get a small amount of overshadowing that sits in those areas. Whilst as we move, this is winter solstice, so by 3 p.m. it's very much overshadowed and kind of coming onto the darker time of day. Whilst in the summer we are achieving kind of high quality spacing located through, albeit there is some overshadowing, but that isn't actually coming from our building, it's coming from the neighbouring property. So as part of our application, we'll be submitting a full daylight sunlight analysis, which will be assessed under the BRE guidance. So that will be available as we basically go through that design approach. Just coming on to landscaping, we've really looked at the ecology, the relaxing and socialising play and the interface of the building and the green space itself. So we see it's really key to get these spaces being used at podium level and at terraces, and making sure we have space for both children and adults. Some of the feedback from public consultation was that the play space gets used by families and children, but the seating areas don't necessarily get used to create that community environment. So really considering how we could engage and get kind of people using those spaces. So here's an early sketch of just what those spaces will look like. We are also looking to optimise the green space at this shoulder as well. So we are looking to potentially add another terrace here to really maximise the amount of green space we can provide to residents. And you can see from just some precedent images of what we might be looking to introduce. So informal play, which are kind of stepping stones that would sit on that podium level for children to play in amongst the planters and amongst that kind of green space, whilst then having kind of growing areas and kind of small allotments that would sit in planters on these high level. We very much see this as kind of not your traditional allotments that are obviously next to us, but more like planters for herb gardens, which we've found very successful in other schemes where residents kind of come together to share and help grow various kind of herbs and spices that they later use for cooking. In addition, we've introduced kind of these rain gardens. These are located at low level. What these effectively do is look at the road strategy. So where as water collects on the road, there's drainage that runs through into these gardens, so effectively captures the water in these spaces and uses to allow growth for green trees, planting and the like that sit in there. And as part of some of our feedback, I think there was concern around flooding. We are looking to potentially remove this area and kind of really optimize as much of that as possible, seeing that it was kind of an area that was felt was key. Just a few more images at high level. We see this as being more leaning towards kind of those seating areas for a different type of engagement. So more about kind of young professionals or parents sitting up at the higher level, being able to use the pergola shading and being able to sit there with, if there are small children playing within some of the play space area. And then finally at the top of the building, we have the green roof and the PV panels also. Just coming on to appearance, we've gone through kind of early character assessment, which was very much about kind of the brickfields, industrial heritage of the site, and then moving on to the Soapside Islands, which is where the name comes from the 1900s. There were 205 laundries in South Acton, so it was a real kind of key attribute to the area, and basically brought the history forward then in 1956 with the area being known as Motor Town. So we've considered how these kind of materiality can be used within the facade and how we can pick up on this detailing to then provide kind of really nice simple detailing through a brick building that is also active and functional at ground floor, so they're getting the interface between the ground floor uses and residents themselves, as well as really trying to keep the history of the site. So do we kind of pick up on some of this crystal glass, kind of the way the frontages of the building open and close, and thinking about that architectural significance, as well as looking to kind of re-energize and create a vibrant location. So potentially looking at to engage with the local artists and the like to see if we can have pocket areas of design or branding and logos and the like that would be the kind of starting point for the regeneration of what could be Soapside Islands or the motorworks that comes forward with that. And finally, just moving on to some of our visuals, we've got a few views just looking down. So our building is this one located here, broadly speaking, from the platform at South Acton Station. We have another view looking up the platform towards the allotments with, and you can see in the background, the Stanley Road scheme that sits in that location there. We've got the wider kind of high level view. This is the Stanley Road scheme, our proposed development, and then the wider kind of TfL site stepping down. And this is the 93 Bollow Lane that we referred to earlier. So that sits kind of the other side of that railway track in the small gap just there. Finally, just to summarise, obviously, as I repeated at the beginning, kind of 110 high quality homes within the borough, of which 35% will be affordable, to provide industrial space at ground floor uses for kind of bigger and larger businesses to be flexible within that space, or to have kind of small startup units. There's a flexibility and future proofing within that design. Providing a green heart with low carbon, sustainable buildings, and really thinking about the biodiversity of the site through not only the green space, but also being car free, providing high quality cycle storage. The scheme will bring jobs to the area, so within the space itself, but also through the construction, and will provide high quality homes for a number of residents that can be affordable, and as well as incorporating that inclusive and accessible design. We're also considering transforming that street seam, so thinking about the new public footways, the green spaces. That's part of our kind of development moving forward. And finally, just reflecting the site's history to provide a really great sustainable development. Thank you for listening, and we'll go on to the Q&A.
Thanks, Vere. That was great. Bang on time as well, so much appreciated. Very comprehensive and informative. We are going to be uploading a recording of this webinar, not the Q&A bit, the Vere's presentation, onto the website, which, if you don't know, is soapsudsworks.co.uk. That's soapsudsworks.co.uk. You may be aware of that website already. So you can check out a recording if you want to see it again. And also for those who couldn't join us, they can always watch it then. So we're going to start the Q&A. Please do keep sending in your questions. We haven't received any yet. So we do have some that we've been sent before, but please do, if any questions spring to mind, just pop them in the Q&A and I'll read them out to the panel. So I will start with some questions that have been sent in advance. I'm going to give Vere a bit of a break because I know that you just spoke for a little while. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about the planning process. Paul, if I might bring you in on this one. We've had a question which is, when is the planning application being made? Perhaps you give us a sense of, how long it would take to get the timelines and then on site.
Great, thanks, Theo. Yes, so I guess a bit of background before that. We've been through a pre-application engagement process with the council. So we've met with the council on a number of occasions, the planning team there. We also met with the GLA, Greater London Authority, had prep meetings with themselves, and been through also the council managed design review panel process and the community review panel process. And then we're now working up, as we said at the start, towards a planning application. We're looking to submit that planning application at the end of January, so early 2023. It is what would be called a major planning application. So it has a statutory time period, but it's a national thing, which means it should be determined within 13 weeks. But there is always a bit of flex within that. So within sort of 13 weeks, it should, in theory, be going to planning committee. But obviously, that depends on sort of, comments and comeback and through the application process from consultees. And then, obviously, once it's been to planning committee, because it's of a certain size, the application gets referred back to the Greater London Authority for what's called stage 2. That's then, assuming they are in agreement with potential approval for this scheme, means they pass the scheme back to the council to approve. But they obviously, as part of that process, we need to then deal with a Section 106 agreement, which would look at contributions for things like education, health, transport improvements, maybe improvements to local parks, and all other such things like that. And once that Section 106 is signed, then the planning permission would be issued if the council are looking to approve the scheme. So all in all, I guess in summary, in theory, submission in January, roughly 13-ish weeks to planning committee. Then I'd say allowing another 2 or 3 months after that to get a planning permission, hopefully issued by the council. And then, and then starting on site, once permission is issued, as you're probably fully aware, there will be planning conditions attached to that decision notice, and they would need to be discharged before any building works could commence.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Also very comprehensive. That covers everything. So the next question, I'm going to talk a little about height. So we had a couple of questions coming in. I know really you've gone through some of the justifications and some explanations of the height of the scheme. Perhaps you could just go over that a little bit again. Some people are a little bit concerned about the height of the building. Perhaps if you could talk through some of that justification.
Yeah, so as we've been developing the scheme, we've obviously been looking at the surrounding heights and the context. So not only the existing context, but obviously the future context as well. So we are very mindful and conscious that we are obviously on an industrial estate, but this, from our perspective, then does allow for tall buildings, given its proximity to the railway line. So we haven't got any neighbours that are of a small scale and mass. Obviously, the allotment is directly to the north of us, but we've been very sensitive with our design, pushing our building to the southwest of the site, and obviously are doing the analysis to ensure that we aren't impacting onto the allotments. The future regeneration and growth of the area is very much of a taller scale, different to what we have seen previously in the South Acton master plan, which was of a slightly lower scale, albeit anything over kind of those 9 stories are deemed as tall buildings as well. So we see that the analysis of the surrounding site has been carried out, and we're working with the future development, so the TfL site, the Stirling and Bollow Lane sites, and obviously our own schemes surrounding coming forward. So that's part of our obviously justification. Within every application, we have a series of kind of reports that we look to produce. Obviously, our daylight sunlight analysis, we have to ensure that we're not impacting on any neighbouring properties, that we have really good high quality, both for ourselves internally, but also for other residents. We also need to consider obviously the townscape, so the urban setting and the nature of the scheme and where it's located. And we do that through a series of agreed views with the council. So not only kind of these visuals that we set up to kind of showcase an indicative view of what the building would look like, but we actually use kind of a piece of software called View City to set up views which show accurately those heights of the buildings within their context, to ensure that we aren't impacting on the surrounding area. I think just to finally wrap up as well, In particular, we live in London, and obviously across London, and as in particular Ealing, there are particular areas of such as conservation area or listed buildings, which are key areas for obviously being protected. Here we're in an industrial estate, so it is for the future regeneration of this in a really high connected area with, you know, 2 close stations, really high P-TAL rating from TfL's perspective. So an opportunity site to really kind of increase the site's kind of, I suppose, value in terms of housing, but also in terms of the affordable housing that's offered on a site such as this. So it is all part of kind of that overall development. It's very much a design-led approach of the site and its existing future context.
Thanks, Vere. That was really helpful. I hope that answers your question, person that sent it in. Right, we still haven't received any questions on the night, so I'm going to run through a few more that we've been sent in, and then we'll probably bring things to a close. So we were asked a question before about some of the sustainability aspects of the buildings. Vere, if I can stay with you just to talk through some of those aspirations.
Mm-hmm. So with all kind of developments coming forward, we now obviously have targets to meet under the GLA, which is be lean, be green, be clean. So we work to that guidance to obviously ensure that the overall building and strategy that we're proposing is in line with that GLA report. Part of that is looking at how we create kind of really high quality buildings with that perform really well, essentially. So in terms of the external envelope, they're really kind of highly insulated, but then we look at how we design the internal layouts as well. So this isn't just about thinking of the building form, but also thinking about how we look at cross ventilation, overheating, daylight sunlight within the building. And all of that gets fed into a wider energy strategy. So for this site in particular, we are looking at a centralized air source heat pump system. So we'll have air source heat pumps that will be on the roof. This obviously reduces the kind of need for electricity bills and the like to be increased, so reducing those costs that are then impacted onto residents. We're also looking at sustainable design such as water retention. Some of the questions we were asked at community review is about flooding, so thinking about our strategy for retaining water on the roofs, so really thinking about having as much green space up there as possible, as well as those rain gardens to make sure that we're not kind of flooding obviously the ground systems as well, and overloading the water. Obviously that is all gone through with Thames Water through part of the design, and that is part of the conditioning as well. Finally, we also look at the materiality of the building and thinking about what has the least kind of amount of carbon impact. So obviously brick being a really great material, it can be reused again in the future should this obviously building ever in the future be demolished, and thinking about how we can be more sustainable in terms of those designs. So now as part of the GLA submission, we issue a whole life cycle carbon report that essentially talks about the whole life of the building, from it being demolished through to its whole life wrapping round of people living in it, and then potential demolition of that in the future. And all of that looks at the embodied carbon of the site and how we can bring that forward in a sustainable way. That's also linked to the circular economy of the building as well, so how the building's used, and how we basically look to provide really kind of high quality sustainable materials through the overall design as well, so from start to finish, and that's limiting materials waste disposal on site, as well as providing additional accreditation like BREEAM Excellent, which will be part of those industrial flexible spaces as well.
Perfect. Thanks for running through that, Vere. We do have one question that's just come in. I know we've touched on height before. This is another one on height, but just in particular looking at the allotments. So I know you probably touched on some of the stuff before. Kieran, do you want to comment on some of that?
Yeah, I mean, we can touch on even just heights in general. I know there was fears that, you know, we might go in for this planning and then go in for extra height later. That's not what we're trying to do. We're not going to do that at all. There's also been, you know, why are we so high? Well, actually, in context to the area, we're not. And we made sure that we were lower than others. Our neighbouring scheme next door is 17 stories. We're 16. So we've tried to minimise the impact on the allotments by staying right to the other edge of the site and giving as much space on that side as possible. But as Vere said in the analysis, we don't overshadow it. We don't do anything. If you're going to have tall buildings in a place, I mean, this is the place to have it. You don't want to have it at the end of your street with low-rise houses. You don't want to have it in sort of these areas. But in this particular area, it is an industrial estate. And actually, it's much needed homes. homes are expensive because we don't produce enough of them. There is a massive need for homes in Ealing, and Ealing homes are expensive. They really are. So, if you can provide more, our population is growing. And with population growth, you need to build homes. It needs to be sustainable. There's huge amounts of surveys and reports and everything else that go into these to make sure that, they're even viable in the first place. As Ria said, the windows have to be a certain size for overheating now. London's getting hotter, so the work that goes into this is substantial. It's mind-boggling actually that where we've come to, but we need to. But height-wise, I'll come back to that. Sorry, it's we've tried to stay as low as possible. Obviously, we need the building to be viable. We're not using our entire site at all. We've pushed it right to the other end. So if we were able to use more of that site, then we'd probably be able to come down in height. The fact is, though, if we do that, then we're going to impact allotments. So you kind of had to have a balance. And working with the council for the last year and a half on this, this is sort of what we've I suppose agreed upon. So this is where we've ended up as being the best solution.
Thanks, Kieran. That's really instructive. We've got another question. I'm going to stick with you, Kieran. We've got another question about.
Oh, okay.
Probably too early to say, but there's a question about prospective price bandings for the units. I don't know if you have any kind of, if it's too early or.
We don't know. So we're in talks with 2 housing associations as well. We've had 2 offers for a 100% affordable scheme. Where we would build it, they would take it, I suppose, and operate it. So it would be 100% affordable, and then we would just keep the commercial element and rent that out to raw industrial, so real business, real industry, bringing that back to the industrial estate. But pricing, I don't know. I don't know. We can't do the deal with the housing associations at this stage because build costs are still rising. You lock in a deal at this stage, and build costs rise, we wouldn't be able to, the deal would never come off the ground. It just wouldn't work. So the plan, hopefully, is to make the whole building 100% affordable. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not accessible to people that want to buy, because within that, there'll be shared ownership and things like that. So actually people living in the borough have an opportunity to purchase them, not at full value. So there will be the tenure mix, I think, is 60-40 in favour of rental. So 40% would be shared ownership, if I'm not mistaken. Paul, is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully, touch wood, everything goes to plan, and they will be affordable, like genuinely affordable. But yeah, as I said, at this stage, it's a little too early to say.
Okay. Thanks, Kieran. Right, we've got another question which has been sent in before. There are 1 or 2 more on height, which I think we've already addressed. I think I'm going to move on to another topic, which is about the car parking and the cycle spaces. I think Ria perhaps might ask you this. Mm-hmm. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on any car parking, if there is, and cycle spaces, if there's not?
So for car parking, under the TfL guidance is that this will be a car-free development other than the wheelchair parking. So we will be providing 3% wheelchair parking, which will be located in front of the building, along with a loading bay to service and access, obviously, deliveries to the residents. Along in front of the industrial units, we're looking to provide, obviously, spaces and location for vans and vehicles to be able to come into the building for drop-offs, servicing and delivery, so that the site isn't kind of compromised by that. In fact, it'll actually be improved for the industrial area, given that currently there's a very small space in front of this building to access the site. So it will allow for that flexibility and future-proofing of those units. In terms of the cycle parking, we have 180 cycle spaces that are located in the basement. This is to provide safe and secure kind of stores. Part of the community review feedback was that quite a lot of the cycle stores locally had been broken into. So locating those in the basement means they are obviously safer and secure. They're designed in line with GLA guidance. So there are 3 different types of stands. There are the Joster stands, which are effectively double stackers. So a bike goes above and below. We have Sheffield stands, which are the kind of upside, I suppose, like N-shaped bars that are put into the ground so you can have a bike on either side. And as part of that, we now provide accessible wheelchair spaces as well. So these are for things like hand bikes or cargo bikes or larger family bikes where children can be sat in the front of those. So we provide all of that in line with the GLA guidance, which is about TfL promoting, obviously, sustainable futures and well-being for people. So not only about the sustainability of the building, but also health and well-being. And given the proximity to the stations and the connectivity that we've referred to, it's deemed as a site that's appropriate for that from the GLA. And as Paul mentioned earlier, as part of the Section 106, there's obviously costs that go into that for local community and infrastructure, effectively to help make future improvements, which would obviously this site to help the road network and the like that would come forward with that.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Ria. I think we've run out of questions. Last chance for anyone to put any more in now. Give you 20 seconds just in case any closing thoughts come in. Otherwise, I think we're going to draw it to a close. Big thank you to panelists. You've got Ria, Paul, Kieran, and the shadow man, Sam, operating the tech behind the scenes. Big thank you to everyone that's come and asked questions and engaged with the project tonight. To reiterate, our consultation website is soapsudsworks.co.uk, soapsudsworks.co.uk, and our email address is actually soapworks. So without the soap suds, it's just soapworks@londoncommunications.co.uk. Also on the website, we'll have the recording of the webinar. There's a survey which you can fill out if you haven't done already. You can email us, you can phone us. Any other questions that you want to ask that didn't come to mind tonight, you want to come back with, totally fine. Just send it through to us and we'll answer them very speedily. So thank you all again. We're going to draw it to a close and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.